Welcome to your second module in the appetite section of this course on obesity and weight management. And in the last unit, we talked about homeostatic appetite. So this is the type of appetite or drive to consume that is influenced by internal factors, such as your nutrient status, such as your energy levels. It's the type of appetite that's related to maintaining energy and nutrient homeostasis. Okay, so things like CCK, GLP-1, ghrelin, and leptin, these are some of the signals that feed back to the hypothalamus to tell the brain basically what's up in the digestive tract, in the in our fat cells, via the vagal nerve as well, through the microbiome. These are some of the feedback signals that tell the brain what's up with internal states. That said, even though all of those things can influence our hunger or a physiological need to consume, we all know that a lot of us eat even when we don't need more energy in that moment, or even though we're not necessarily depleted in energy. We might have no physiological need or drive to consume, but we still want to eat. And that's something that's sometimes called non-homeostatic appetite, or I'll just call it non-homeostatic feeding, in this case, the actual behavior of feeding. And this is driven by, a complex interaction of factors that includes things like our memories of food or memories about what we typically do at a particular time of day, what's going on in our brain, and how our thinking brain, what I like to call our thinking brain, is interpreting signals around the sight, smell, thought, taste of various foods that may or may not be in our environment. Our non-homeostatic feeding pathways are really integrated with our reward pathways and learning pathways as well. And they also can be definitely influenced by stress as well. So these are some of the things we are going to try our best to unpack in this module. And I'm laughing because this is, for me, one of the hardest modules to put together. I find the science really difficult to unpack because, we're talking about the brain and we're talking about a lot of individual differences, right? So obviously we have different memories about things. We have different thoughts about things. We have different ways that we've learned things and different things we've experienced, different stress levels, etc. So this kind of interplay of factors can be really individual as far as overriding those homeostatic factors and causing certain people to have more of a desire to consume than others. So we're going to try to unpack some of this non-homeostatic appetite and some of the neural pathways involved in it. Okay, so important things to remember though in this unit is I'm going to talk about certain regions of the brain. I'm going to talk about the hippocampus. I'm going to talk about the prefrontal cortex. I'm going to talk about the nucleus accumbens and the reward pathway. And what would be a mistake for both you and I to do is to say, this region of the brain does this, that region of the brain does that, and just think of it really in a reductionist way like that. Please remember that, like all systems in the body, the nervous system is very highly, especially the central nervous system, is very highly integrated. There is a lot of connections, a lot of projections between different areas, and it's really hard to fully unpack this material because the brain is so complex. And also, I'm dividing feeding and appetite. Appetite is our desire to consume. Feeding is like actually consuming. I'm dividing those into homeostatic, maintaining homeostasis versus non-homeostatic appetite. But these pathways, they influence each other. Okay, so for instance, if someone has kind of a higher tendency to eat under stress and they're also hungry, right, that might further increase how much they consume in a meal. Okay, if that makes sense. So all of these things are highly interconnected, so it's hard to, again, fully unpack them all, but keep that in mind. And then, of course, this is an obesity class, so it's important to remember how all of this material relates to individuals that are in sometimes larger bodies. And we do believe that in individuals with obesity, both homeostatic and non-homeostatic appetite is often shifted to a pro-eat, right? A pro-appetite condition where individuals have a higher drive to consume that is influenced physiologically, but is also influenced by like memories and cognition and our thought processes and our emotions, etc. Okay, so this slide again is a complexity slide. We've seen this before, and again I just wanted to remind us of how complex appetite is. So what we've mostly been focusing on is the hypothalamus, and it's that central location where appetite is located more or less in the brain. And we've also been talking about all those circulating factors that can influence our desire to consume, and all the areas of the body that influence those circulating factors that can affect our desire to consume. And then remember, there's the vagal afferents as well that are involved in that. Okay, but in this unit, I also want to talk about these other factors that are kind of associated with, but we might say outside of these more homeostatic features as far as promoting appetite, right? So things, I'm not actually going to talk about the amygdala that much, but we do know that the amygdala, that area of our body that's associated with things like fear and emotions, that has an influence on our appetite center. We're going to be talking about the hippocampus, which is often associated with memory and learning, and that how that has an effect on our desire to consume, and how that also influences our reward pathway, and how our reward pathway influences our desire to consume. And then, of course, external stimuli that are sensed by our sensory parts of our brain, and then made sense of with some of our thinking parts of our brain, how those can go on to affect appetite as well. So I don't expect you to memorize this photo, but I like this image, this conceptual model, because it helps to remind us that you can't fully separate homeostatic and non-homeostatic appetite. And it gives you maybe a schematic that can help you bring these concepts together. So this slide is really about some of the difficulties in unpacking this literature, and part of the problem is that there's so many different constructs that are used to help us understand the different versions that there might be of non-homeostatic appetite, right? So binge eating is an example of non-homeostatic appetite. Food addiction, should we choose to believe that that's a thing, because there's debates about whether that exists or not, that could be considered part of non-homeostatic appetite. So could food cravings, so could loss of control eating. And what this review paper actually argued is, can't we just say they're all kind of part of this uncontrolled eating? So is that kind of another word that we could use for non-homeostatic appetite? So uncontrolled eating is a term that I'll use a little bit through this unit. I don't love it because it feels a bit stigmatizing to me to use the term uncontrolled eating, because I don't know, I think we have a lot of judgments around food and control, and some people think that if they have more control over their food, that makes you better. I don't know, I feel like there's some moral value that's sometimes given to how much control we have over food. But what we're going to argue in this unit is that there's a lot of things that affect how much control we actually have, and we might actually have less control over our eating behavior than we might have previously assumed. Okay, I'm not saying we don't have control over our eating behavior, because of course we do, but as we saw in the homeostatic appetite unit, there are a lot of things that can be different between individuals that can impact their desire to consume. So using the umbrella construct of uncontrolled eating, which is influenced by non-homeostatic appetite, I want to divide this unit further into three main areas: reward sensitivity, cognitive control, and negative effect, but I'm going to expand on that as well. So when I talk about reward sensitivity, what I'm talking about is that some individuals might have a higher drive to seek out things that are rewarding. So we see this concept come up a lot in the drug dependency literature as well, where we would argue that some people that have a dependency to, let's say, cocaine or other types of drugs, they might have alterations in reward sensitivity. So kind of in order to feel a certain level of satisfaction or reward, they need to kind of seek out something external more and more and more. And we believe that this is one of the things that influences someone's drive to consume are differences in this reward sensitivity. And we'll talk about the reward pathway in the brain. Dopamine gets a lot of press these days, and it's kind of the main neurotransmitter or neuromodulator that's involved in this reward sensitivity. Another area that's important to discuss when it comes to non-homeostatic appetite is this concept of cognitive control and how much of it we actually have. So when I talk about cognitive control, I'm mainly talking about my prefrontal cortex and my executive function, my abilities to make decisions and have goals and make plans and actually execute them. So for instance, some people, we often see this, some people, they go on a diet and they really want to stick to it and it means a lot to them and they're, okay, I'm going to do it this time. I have goals, I have plans, I set out all these things I'm going to do. Well, when they have issues around stress or changes in mood or there's really rewarding things around them, it's great to have plans, but when you're faced with actually the circumstances, it's hard to actually exert that cognitive control over all those other neural factors and environmental factors that are promoting your drive to consume. So we're going to talk about some of that. And then I'll also talk about negative affect or kind of low mood, you can think of it that way, or negative emotionality, you can think of it that way as well, and things like stress and memory and how all of those can impact our drive to consume. Okay, so that's how the rest of this unit is going to be divided up, but I just wanted to give you a basis for us starting, and I will see you in the next unit when we talk about reward sensitivity, which is fascinating.